This meeting will be conducted as a Zoom webinar to allow for public participation and comments. The Contra Costa Transportation Authority does not condone hate speech in any form. We continually strive to make life better for all members of our community and create an atmosphere where everyone feels a sense of safety and belonging. We ask that anyone who wishes to speak does so with civility, respect, and kindness for others. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organizations, but providing such information is voluntary. Citizens participating in person wishing to speak should submit a public speaker card to the clerk. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice on the meeting agenda will be provided to the members. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand or submit a public speaker card, and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Great. Emily, will you please conduct roll call?
Member Essel Sego,
Present.
Member James,
Here.
Member Lovejoy,
Present.
Member Miller,
Present.
Member Patel,
Here.
Member Saunders,
Here.
Member Shakaran,
Here.
Member Stark,
Here.
Member Torf,
Present.
Member Wayne,
Here.
Vice Chair Carr,
Here.
Chair Ash.
Here.
We do have a quorum with members Bankert, Chahal, and Esquivel absent.
Great. And we have 2 new members of the committee. We'd like to welcome first Christy Lovejoy from Contra Costa County, a seat provided, appointed by the county. Christy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Christy Lovejoy, live in El Sobrante and member of Contra Costa for about 10 years. Glad to be here and serve with you all today.
Thanks. And our next new member is Kai Christian Torf from the city of Oakley. Kai, would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course, no, it's a pleasure to virtually meet you guys and also everyone in attendance. So excited to be a part of this, and recently a new member to Oakley 2 years ago, but also excited to be on the council as well. So thank you.
Great, thank you. So our first item on the agenda is for public comment. Is there, I see no members of the public here. Do we have any members on Zoom?
No members on Zoom, and I have not received any public comments.
Okay, great. I'm going to skip the instructions until there is somebody. The next item on the agenda is the consent calendar, which includes the summary of actions from January 24th, 2024 meeting and acknowledgement of the member attendance log. Are there any changes or comments from the committee members? Have we received any written public comments?
No written public comments.
Okay. Do I have a motion and a second? Approve. Anybody?
I move that we accept it as presented.
Thank you, Member Miller, for firsting it. Anybody else? Second?
Second.
Okay, Member Wayne, thank you for the second. Emily, can you please conduct a roll call vote?
Member Essel Sego,
Aye.
Member James,
Aye.
Member Lovejoy,
Aye.
Member Miller,
Aye.
Member Patel,
Yes.
Member Saunders,
Yes.
Member Shakaran,
Yes.
Member Stark,
Yes.
Member Torf,
Aye.
Member Wayne,
Yes.
Vice Chair Carr,
Aye.
Chair Ash.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously with members Bankert, Chahal, and Esquivel absent.
We will now move to the regular agenda items. We have 3 informational items. The first will be introduced by Matt Kelly and presented by the Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority.
Thank you, Chair Ash. Good evening, committee members. Matt Kelly, Senior Transportation Planner with the authority. So over the last year or so, for those of you who are current members over the last year, we heard a lot of presentations from the different cities about activities going on there as part of their checklist presentations. And we heard, various cities talk about plans for rail stations and service on the Capitol Corridor, which runs through our county and currently serves 2 stations. And a lot of questions came up about that service that the city reps couldn't necessarily answer. So we heard from you all that you'd like to receive a presentation from the Capitol Corridor folks. So we have invited Jim Allison. He's the manager of planning for the Capitol Corridor Joint Powers Authority. I think I got the title right. So he has joined us in person tonight to provide us with a presentation on their activities, and he'll be able to take your questions after the presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Jim and let him walk you through the Capitol Corridor service in the county.
I think I've shared the video. Yes. Is that working? Great. Thank you. Thank you, Malika. Jim Allison, Manager of Planning. I'm pleased to be here, and I do recognize one familiar face who might speak up on an item that I'll be covering here. So I'll try to keep the presentation to about 20 minutes. There's a lot of information packed in here. I'm going to cover about 3 different projects or initiatives, and I've compressed a lot of things, and so there could be questions of how did we come to that decision or approach on things. So just a little bit about the route. We are roughly 170, 172 miles, depending on which track you measure. We've got the service that covers the Northern California mega region. We do go into the Sierra foothills with one round trip between Auburn and Sacramento. But the core of our service is Oakland, the Bay Area, and then we extend some of those trains down to San Jose and Silicon Valley. So we're the only current public transport that covers this territory, the Northern California mega region. And when we, as offering the service, we really rely on extensive connections to local transit, which is a popular way to get to the train as well as other modes. So here's a little bit about our governance. We have elected board members to those respective boards, but then they're appointed or they sit on our board, and you can see the representation here, and then they feed into our agency both as a board but also as a staff coordinating group where staff from those agencies work with us. And then we have partners on the bottom row. CalSTA is the state Secretary of Transportation, who works on our funding with the state subsidy and the goals of the service. And then Union Pacific Railroad, who I'll touch in a bit, a huge player, very influential in terms of our service. Amtrak, of course, and that's the brand identification. And we're happy to report, for the most part, that the FRA is more involved now because of the infrastructure bill. And then certainly local communities, such as you all and those who look after the stations that we have. And we don't own the stations, by the way, so that's just could be a bit of information. So here's the basics for right now. We have 30 weekday trains and 22 on the weekend. And as of yesterday, we finally got back over the million rider mark in the latest 12 months. And we were at 1.8 before that pandemic. So we are in recovery mode. And one of the things that shifted for us was the mix of trip purposes that we had. We used to have like 50% commute to and from work. That's decreased, and when that pie decreases, the other pies go up, such as visiting family or friends, and that's the primary thing, more leisure type travel than we had before, but we still have a very strong contingent. So today I'm going to talk about the Hercules station, the new Carquinez high-level bridge crossing, and Link 21. Hercules, I only have one slide on, but I'm going to preface this whole discussion with some important background information. So we are so linked in with Union Pacific because they own the bulk of our right of way, that when we think of doing capital projects, we have to think about their perspective and working with them to make sure that things continue to run as smoothly as possible, both for freight and for passengers. So they actively hear when we say, well, we'd like to add more frequency or do this there. They want to protect that. That's their perspective. And so to do that, we have to model out kind of in a like a simulation model as to what the effect of adding that service would be. Does it degrade service? Well, if it does, then you have to build track infrastructure to offset that. And all of this takes a long time to get working through. You have to almost design a rudimentary bit of the network before you can build a model, and then you have to build the schedule around it. And then if it can support that, then it stands a chance of approval. But the problem is, and the many challenges that we have, is that Union Pacific is a publicly traded company, and they like to occasionally do layoffs of the very people that we want to do the modeling. So we had an intern working on some modeling before, and it all got very slow and stuff. So the bottom line is that it does get really slow for us to plan these things out. We can't just do it ourselves because we're not the owner of the railroad. And so that's an important overarching piece of our existence. So we're friends with UP. We work with them as much as we can, but it is frustrating at times because of things we can't control. One thing that is coming along, it's been in the works a long time, is the new Hercules station. We've started back in the early 2000s working with the city of Hercules, and that went through some changes over time in terms of the city, but we're working on a process to get that station in place. We modified our train station policy because it wasn't working, and it would leave certain cities in the lurch. They had to get the whole package together. So we built a conditional approval, and that's what happened in 2020. The board approved a conditional candidate station at Hercules. And we've been working with Hercules and those who assist with the city of Hercules to get that station going, including getting funding approvals, including working with Union Pacific. So if you have more questions about that, there's somebody in your group here that would know something about that. And maybe we'll present on that one day. So maybe you'll ask a good question, Sheena, about it. So I'm working with Sheena on that. So we're working on funding grants for the city of Hercules. So I'm going to talk about this next project is the new Carquinez Rail Crossing. This is a project, there's a lift bridge, as you may be aware. That's kind of that rusty thing in between the two 680 bridges. It's an old bridge, it does lift, and when it lifts, we get delayed for our service. And because it does lift, the delay is about 20 minutes. We don't think that it makes sense to add more service between Sacramento and Oakland and just increasing your chances to have that bridge lift on you. And it will throw the whole day out of slots. So this is a very big priority item. The bridge was completed in 1930. They don't make the parts for it, so they have to remake them if they break. And the reason it lifts is because the marine traffic has priority over rail traffic. So we can't just keep going. So we have to wait while the marine traffic goes through for all the conditions that marine traffic has. So we do work with them to tell them what our schedule is, and they can maybe slow down that watercraft a little bit, but at some point there's a limit to that. So we conducted a new study to look at what we would do to replace that. We started off with like 14 different options, and they included different reroutes, different ideas for tunnels, going up above with bridges, going under with tunnels. And we did that screening initially to just cast a wide net and look at what the best options were. And we came down to 4 routes that had some potential for a new crossing. Those was our Vallejo route, an Interstate 80 route, which is also kind of a Vallejo route, And then we concentrated on two routes that kind of surround the existing bridge structures, the 680 and the rail bridge, a western one and a eastern one. We threw all the 14 through some criteria that you see listed here. And that's how we narrowed down to these other ones which seem viable. And there's lots of reasons that I'm not going to go into why those other ones were kind of thrown out, but these were the best four that we could get out of that the bar board deemed worthy of continuing to work on the next phase of the study. So that leaves basically the pink route, which is a representative of a Vallejo type options, and then the orange one is sort of the, if you will, the Benicia Martinez type options. So what we were trying to do is run enough trains per hour and also accommodate freight trains. And I'm going to briefly go over these findings that we've had. Some of the areas in that dash line are not parts that are completed yet of the study. But so for instance, we haven't studied going through the Sassoon Marsh, but we've definitely studied the solid lines about going through Vallejo, at least at this level. So the main reasons that we have to consider the construction and the associated infrastructure with these is we have to clear these red dots. And those are the navigation channels that we see. I will draw your attention to the upper right picture where there's only one dot, one red line that continues to the east. And if you think about it, that might be the one that we're favoring because there's only one thing to cross. But we'll talk about how we came to that. So when we consider what a new bridge would have to deal with, it's dealing with forces, wind, wave, everything that's acting on it. And then you have to deal with the loads of the train and the bridge itself, types of trains. And then you have to deal with the distance and the weight and the stretch between those spans. And the bigger the bridge gets, the worse and more expensive this gets. But finally, if you build it bigger and bigger and bigger to hold up even its own weight, you finally get a bridge that can survive all those forces and those interactions. And so at the bottom there, you see a happy bridge, but one that has eaten through a lot of money. And so we considered all those factors in just looking at the bridge part. And that's not the end of the story. It's not just about getting a bridge. It's about the approaches to it, but the bridge is an important part. So this is more of an engineering diagram here where it's looking at the different forces, the dead load to live load ratio, and then the moments and those forces on it. And you can see the Vallejo Crockett type bridge is at the far end of what's really usually built. Means it's quite expensive. And that already says that the Benicia Martinez option is the better option just in terms of cost. Doesn't mean it's better in terms of social impact or anything like that, but it is the better option just in terms of pure engineering. So a lot of things that we looked at with the Vallejo option, it is a heavier bridge. It's crossing two navigation channels. To accommodate freight on that with the different grades is a bigger challenge. It involves going out into the bay to make the grade acceptable to freight. There's tunneling impacts below homes and structures in Vallejo. And then once you get into Vallejo, it doesn't stop because then there's these grade separations, and the more frequency you have, you need to deal with those at grade crossings and maybe separate them. So it just gets gargantuanly a big challenge. So we're not ruling it out. This isn't the stage where we rule things out, but it's a big, big challenge. So the options on the Benicia Martinez side, the west side has the disadvantage of those two navigation channels. Because of the grades, there's more disruptions in Martinez to the refinery and the different starting points of the rail bridge, the approaches. And then there's challenge just getting through the freeway maze up in the Benicia side of it. So that leaves the east option as really the most favorable. And that would be east of the existing highway bridge. There's various concepts that allow two freight tracks and two passenger tracks to work, keep the speeds high. And it has much more minimal impacts to downtown Martinez in terms of just looking at grade separations or things that are done there. there's an approach idea if you've taken the Capitol Corridor along the waterfront. You see the water out there and we hear about sea level rise, so we need to be building a future rail infrastructure with that in mind. And there's also some improvements that can happen along that stretch, basically from Richmond to Martinez, to speed things up, to deal with sea level rise, help goods movement, and may involve slope stabilization, because you've probably seen the hillside that sometimes slumps down to the tracks. So lots to do on this whole effort. And so if we give the gold cup, it's to the east route. So it scores better on all those bridge complexity, the approaches complexity, community impacts for sure, and the freight barriers. It's by far the easier option. So you don't know how much I left out on that part, but there's a lot other details, a lot of other details for that. But that is a big portion of what Contra Costa is involved with, because it's a lot of that consideration is in the county. So I'm going to shift now to Link 21, which you may have heard of, or hopefully you have heard of it, because there's been a big outreach effort. On the surface, it looks like an effort to do a Trans-Bay rail crossing of some kind, the BART, or is it standard gauge like Capitol Corridor style or Caltrain style? So that's a decision coming up this year to both the BART board and Capitol Corridor board, which gauge would be the right gauge to put through a new undercrossing between the East Bay. And I'm not going to answer that because that needs to be answered by other policymakers. And but there's some ideas that the groups are forming in terms of the analysis that's done. So again, moving out to the big picture of Northern California, this is a vibrant region, lots of jobs and housing, but we do have that consistent traffic, and it's gradually getting worse even after the pandemic. So, and this creates different impacts to communities, and the passenger rail service can do so much more than it can today. It's a bit inconvenient. It's hard for me to say that about Capitol Corridor, but it's true. It's not as frequent as it could be. Occasionally a bridge lifts and delays it. And it doesn't have as many options or frequency to make it the choice that it could be. So Link 21's effort was to look at a new crossing between across the bay. It would, if one mode is chosen, if BART's chosen, then there would be enhancements to rail on that. But conversely, if rail's chosen, then there would be enhancements to BART to make those connections stronger. The two work together to create a more redundant and reliable system that's integrated with more frequency options for both short and long-term travel. The process of working through this is kind of documented in other efforts. It's called a stage gate effort. And we're in stage gate 2 right now. And these are different checkpoints that are had along the way to make sure that we're doing the right thing. We've made the right decisions. And then we parse things off in the stage gate. Going to stage gate 2 is implying that stage gate 1, the decision of what the project is, will have been made before we get out of stage gate or phase 1. So that's the question. What is it? BART gauge or standard gauge? What it isn't would be decided, and why do you decide to do one or the other now? There's lots of reasons for making a decision and not saving it for later, because you're not, for one, the communications are difficult when you don't know which technology you're doing, and the engineering and so many other things. So that's the reason to go through these. The questions being explored is, what is it trying to do? What's the value of doing this? And what are the financial drivers behind it? And then how can the project be delivered in what phases? So we've talked about it's a crossing between San Francisco and points on the East Bay, Oakland, Emeryville or so. But it's so much more than that, because that opens up so much more. So at some point, Link 21 has to end. It can't keep going to Sacramento or to Reno. It's just, that's too big a scope. There's other projects that will work with Link 21 to complete everything, but the focus is on what could it do, and then focusing later on the engineering to get across and the connection to the rail network of one type or the other. That's what Link 21's, the role that Link 21's holding. So the reason for doing this is that the connections are important. The connections to BART with rail, as I mentioned, either which way, the transfers are important to create a good rail network. What they found so far is that most of the demand, and it's not surprising, is probably from the East Bay to get into San Francisco. But there's so many more crossing potentials of communities outside the East Bay direct area, further afield, definitely Sacramento. So looking further afield is an important piece of what Link 21 is, but you do see most of the trips here because that's where the density is. But there's also a reason to expand to other new markets and deal with advancing equity across that entire mega region. So they've conducted extensive outreach, reaching out to folks, and held community workshops. And they're talking about and hearing from folks what's important to them in this effort. It's more than just jobs. It's like we saw with our service, more leisure trips and more ability to get around to the events or people you want to see. So this is just a view of what regional rail in the crossing might look like. And it's kind of showing what a regional rail focused service might look like. It would, the more frequency be connected between Richmond into the San Francisco Bay Area and then a little bit down to the Coliseum. But there would also be connections made with other existing rail operators such as Capitol Corridor, who could go through such a tube as well. So it's a much bigger footprint to consider regional rail than BART. And so that's what some of the wrestling is, to think, is it that bigger scope, or is it more looking at what BART would do more locally? And you can see this is an example of what the BART connections would look like, what its benefits are, what's being considered. If it's BART, it's going to be more of a Federal Transit Administration type approach, an FTA approach. If it's regional rail, it's going to be more FRA plus also FTA, because there's a split in rail if you don't know about it, which is a little frustrating because sometimes you're commuter rail, sometimes you're intercity rail. And when you're intercity, you go with the FRA. When you're FRA, you don't look at commuter except for safety. But so there's all these complications with that. But nonetheless, there's a lot of funding in heavy rail or intercity rail at this point in time. So that's having some influence. And this is just an example of what looks like with travel time savings, considering coming from the Sacramento direction, with the various series of improvements that could be created. You could save about 22 minutes on that journey, getting directly into the city. So that's some of the travel benefits that could be had with the regional rail. So that concludes the presentation of a lot of things that I didn't get into too much, but I can hopefully answer some questions if I've piqued any questions from you. So my pleasure.
Okay, so that was a lot of information. We appreciate that. Looks like you're ready to go with questions. So we'll go this way around, and you could either just skip, but I'll include everybody and we'll circle back this way.
Yeah, so I guess, to compare the Capitol Corridor to the Caltrain. So Caltrain is considered intercity rail?
Caltrain's considered commuter rail and Capitol Corridor is considered intercity rail.
Okay, because I guess my pet peeve, I represent Martinez. So like a trip from average price from San Francisco to San Jose is around $9 to $12. Now, if you live in Martinez, which we don't have BART, we don't have the nearest BART station is actually North Concord, which is going the opposite direction from what if you're commuting into San Francisco or San Jose. So really the closest one would be Pleasant Hill, which is 10 miles from roughly 10 miles from Martinez. So the Capitol Corridor, the average price to get in, which Martinez, and they usually got a train running every hour, pretty roughly, is, the average price is $25. And actually, if you get one of the other carriers, the long distance carriers, there's like 2 or 3 that go through Martinez a day, they're actually like cheaper. They're almost like sometimes $12. So I guess my question is how can we get the Capital Corridor to be cheaper like Caltrain is?
Well, good question. So we have to, as a state, one of the state intercity services, we have to meet a fare box ratio of roughly 50%. So that means that the costs that we have to operate the service are supposed to be covered by fares at about 50%. The costs, if we lower the cost, we can lower the fares. One of the ways that we're working on that right now is another project I didn't put on here, but it's called it's associated with the California Integrated Travel Project, which is looking at, among other things, using contactless fares, such as what you pay, you tap your card at a coffee shop or at the gas station. That's a contactless open loop sort of card. We are experimenting with that right now. Just the cost of collecting fares themselves has a cost. And if we can lower the cost of that and pass it on to the public, which we are doing right now in terms of a trial, we can lower the cost of those fares. The cost of an Amtrak ticket, we don't know for sure, but it's probably somewhere between 20 to 25% of the cost of that ticket is to pay for the personnel, the data and everything that collects the cost of that ticket. So it's already costing yourself with that method that much. We are hoping to get the contactless fare payment collection maybe down to 10 to 15% if we can. So that's one way to do it. The other thing that can be done, if you're buying a single ride ticket, it is more pricey and it's really challenging for a family to take everybody on a single ride ticket, but there are multi-ride discounts. So those who ride frequently are going to be significantly less than that. And those discounts are about 40%. And so we would pass those on. We already do pass those on even through an Amtrak ticket. So it's a tough issue. We do have to, we look at that, but we also look at trying to, if you will, minimize the need to raise fares, especially on single ride, because we realize it's at a high price point. But there are some amenities that we have on that, and it doesn't generally get stuck in traffic and has nice Wi-Fi and a bar car and things like that. So there are amenities that are.
What is the percentage of commuters on Caltrain?
I don't know what it is on Caltrain. I know it used to be a lot more, but they have, since the pandemic, I think they've lost a lot of ridership. But they're primarily they have more frequency.
But how could you, is there a possibility that you can change the Capital, at least maybe not the whole Capital Corridor, but let's say, for people that want to connect to BART, that's because really it is a commuter train. If you live in Martinez and you're not being serviced by the transportation system to use Martinez, like go from Martinez to like that one trip to go to Richmond for you, because Richmond, that's the hub. They have a nice connection there. It's easy to connect. So what does it take to change the classification from intercity to commuter train?
Well, we are researching that for reasons other than fare to see if we could kind of wear two hats when we want.
Because it's not, I'm not just saying about fare, but I mean, obviously if you make it cheaper, people will use it a lot more, especially, you got State Route 4, which is already pretty packed. And I'm looking at Martinez, but you also, the other cities like Antioch, Pittsburgh, they have a BART station, but just to make that connection, you would just take more vehicles off. And that's the reason that I know the state of California, I know you're talking about the fare box rate, but that's why Capital Train is so much cheaper, because Caltrans wanted to take the vehicles off Interstate 80 there in 101. And so And and also the capital corridor, that's why, that's also supported by state funds. Because actually Amtrak at one time was going to close that service down too before the state of California bought it off them. So, but for me, represent my area, you got Martinez, Richmond BART station. To me, that there should be, to make that connection that, we're always talking about the last step. That there must be some way, is there any way to just deal with that right there, to make that connection a commuter, that one section?
There isn't really a way to do that, just to make it certain trip pairings, commuter, even though people may use them like a commuter, which definitely happens. There's no designation that we can do or no, we have to look at the fares holistically in terms of all the directions that people might go to, all the origin destinations. Probably the best recommendation though, for folks who want to use the capital corridor as part of their commuting strategy, or at least business trip strategy, is to buy some of the multi-rides, either the monthlies or the 10 rides.
I understand that, but I guess my point is that, I guess you call your local representatives. But, to me, it seems unfair that you have the Caltrain is so much cheaper. And I understand one's designated commuter train, one's, inner city, but.
Well, they own their right of way too. So, I mean, there's some nice things there, and they operate at a lower cost recovery ratio than we do. So we have a higher threshold to meet, but their board can set that. It's, and they're close to each other. And I know a lot of people compare them, but they really are fundamentally different in terms of how they're run.
Aren't they both owned basically by the state of California?
No,
No.
Why don't you just
All right.
clarify, like, could you bullet point out what are the differences between the two? Because I think that would be
Yeah.
helpful to understand.
So frequency, far more frequency on Caltrain, managed by a local joint powers board of elected officials. It's managed by FTA, doesn't have state funding guidelines. It's not getting a state subsidy, it's getting a local subsidy. It's eligible for subsidy from shares from available to MTC, that's, federal monies that we don't have access to. So we are a state only operated service. So our subsidy is all state. Those are just some key points. And then we have different fare objectives, different fare vehicles, different service, different amenity, different seats, all sorts of things.
And then I heard they own their right of way and you have to pay UP for your right of way.
We do have to pay per train mile on our right away.
Other questions or?
No, thank you.
Chair, we can work, if you guys would like, to pen a letter to, the Joint Powers Authority requesting that they look at that, that segment of track and see if there's something that can be done in terms of the pricing. That's something we could do, either this group or our board, is to write a letter to get them, thinking about it.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, let's come back to that question when we're all done and if we want to recommend that. But something that we've talked about in the past is how do we make more recommendations and be more active as a group like that? So, yeah.
So, couple kind of little things here. So if I understood, the demand was you had to provide enough capacity to meet the demand estimated in 2050 is what I saw. That thing's only getting installed in 2039. That just seems like an incredibly short window. You would think, I would have thought that it would have a much kind of tighter or longer design criteria for how important it is.
Yeah, are you getting at Blink 21 in terms of the?
I don't know. There was a slide up there that said designed for capacity to 2050, but I thought it was going to be installed in 2039. And that's why maybe I misread it.
Oh, no, it's not saying it's going to be beyond capacity. It's just saying that they're evaluating that future year. They're designing, I mean, hopefully we can get it done by 2039, but it's It's not that it's only good for 11 years of
Well,
capacity.
okay.
So
well,
this is just, they just set a target, 2050, let's meet that target and then some. It's not like it's useless after that, or it's
Okay.
not like.
Well, I hope there's a
overcapacity.
bunch some to it. not
Yeah,
just-
it needs to be, it
Okay,
needs
that's
to be
fine.
used.
I
yeah.
just was,
Yeah.
just sort of jumped out at me. The other question, I mean, there's our other massive state rail project kind of ties in, or in theory is tying into different parts of the maps on where, is there any connection to the high-speed rail? I realize the trains would be different, but how that's all connecting, or does that assume it all connects at Gridiron and that's kind of what happens with it?
There's a initial connection at Salesforce Transit Center in San Francisco. And it's be a cross-platform transfer there with high-speed rail.
So they'd come all the way up and
Yeah,
then
they-
you're going across the bay
Yeah,
and that's
go-
where, okay. Okay, thank you.
Just a quick question. What is the average speed of the, let's say, the Caltrain commuter rail versus Capital Corridor?
I don't know the Caltrain one. I know it's not as fast as ours
Yeah,
in terms of average speed. I think our average speed, I believe, is 43 to 48 miles, and that's including all the stops,
including.
because
the
you got to
stops.
stop. I think Caltrain, Baby Bullets, much faster. And then the one that stops all the time, I'm going to guess that they're probably going in the 30s. I don't know for sure.
Mhm.
But, you know, the frequency of stops just drops your speed, your average speed down. And so that's one of the station policies that in terms of working with the city of Hercules, is new stations need to mitigate their loss, the added time they have. So you look for projects to speed up. So we try to keep our speeds around there. We can go faster with more improvements, but that's about the average.
So I'm assuming there must be some kind of a regulation regarding speed that they have to maintain.
Not,
Trains, yeah.
well, in operations, yes. There's a maximum speed limits, given the conditions of the track, the way it's built and
Okay.
maintained.
Thank you.
A couple questions. So first on the Hercules station, where is the location and kind of where are you in terms of planning and building? And when might it open?
Maybe somebody next to you can help answer that. We're not building it. We're helping to build it. All our stations are owned by the cities. So the city of Hercules is really in the driver's seat. Sheena is working on the engineering and the funding aspects of it. It needs to go through design and then get funding for construction. So we're right now trying to get the design funding to a point where you can get through the final design and you have your cost estimates and you say, okay, I need X dollars from here, Y from here, Z. Now we can build it. I don't know exactly when it will open. It will probably it's got to be at least 5 years from now. It'll probably take a little bit longer.
One other question, just on kind of timeline, was for your Link 21 phases, can you kind of walk us through like what's coming up next and kind of what you expect there?
Okay, next in this year, probably, I think it's supposed to be in August. I'm not running Link 21 directly, but I think it's in the, late summer, early fall. They're going to decide which technology. So is it BART that they want to go with, or is it regional rail or heavy rail? And then you can see here roughly the project selection when they're going to, once they get out of phase one, they're going to say, okay, it's one or the other. And now we're going to design for that technology. We're going to look at alternatives to that. But you can see the different steps here on this slide here. It's a long-term project. It's very complicated. And once they get to the East Bay, they have to work with Union Pacific. And they haven't really started that piece because they didn't know if their BART's not going to work with Union Pacific. It's different technology.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jim, for the presentation. I just have a couple of questions, nothing on Hercules, but
Okay, perfect.
yeah.
I'm sorry I put you on the spot, but I know that.
Yeah, I was gonna clarify, I think we're targeting 2030 for activities, but that's all funding dependent. So we're working hard on that. So on the new rail crossing, there was a couple alignments you showed, and it looks like there may be one standout. But I was just wondering how, because obviously there's existing stations along the existing route. So how do you plan to collaborate with the locals that have stations currently? And make sure that they have access to Capitol Corridor in a future alignment?
Are you asking from a Link 21 perspective or
From a,
Carquinez crossing?
The
'Cause-
Carquinez crossing is the
Okay.
one I was, yeah.
So so that's just a study at this point in time. If we were, let's say the Vallejo option had looked good, then we would have had to, do all the analysis, do all the environmental disclosure to say, guess what, we're not going to serve Martinez anymore. And so that would have been a whole big process, and it would have been a bit shocking to the board because our board is oriented around serving Martinez. So that the state had that as an idea. With the alignment that we seem to prefer, the east alignment, we really don't lose serving any stations. So everything that we serve today would still be able to be served using that alignment. There would be modifications along the way, but no stations themselves would have to be eliminated.
And is there, I don't know when you guys are selecting, sounds like it's in the future, but when you guys are selecting the preferred alignment, is there a public comment period before you would select the preferred alignment where a committee like this could maybe recommend the Martinez crossing so we can maintain the stations that we have?
There will be so this is a planning study, so it's nothing official. It's not a environmental process. So we will have a hearing when this study is finally adopted. That will probably be in November of this year, possibly September. So there'll be a hearing there just for the gist of accepting the study, and weighing in could happen there. But certainly during environmental review, public scoping comments would have to be garnered. And that's such a huge project. We would probably go to all the boards you could imagine, transportation boards, just to give an update about the project.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mhm.
And then I guess one more clarification on that one. So the new alignment, that would be proposed to be CCJPA owned alignment, right? So there wouldn't be any UP challenges on that alignment as far as,
On the Carquinez,
yeah, on
The
the
one-
new
yeah.
rail crossing.
well, that's the discussion is that we would probably keep the same routing, but the long-term objective, both in our vision plan, is to get our own dedicated tracks. And that is the real goal, is to get out of the way, get out of each other's way. So that would be the goal of what we're kind of looking at in terms of building the way the bridge could be built. It could be double decker where the freight is lower and we're up higher because we can climb a more steep grade. That's one way to cross. The other way to cross is side by side. But in general, once you're on the land, going side by side would be more the idea. Of course, there could be crossover and share the tracks, but that would be the longer term objective, is to get our own dedicated
Okay,
tracks.
so it would still be shared like right away with UP?
Yes,
And then would UP then be funding part of that project as a partner
to
agency?
be determined. You would think, I think there would be an ask because we're replacing a bridge.
Right.
It's a big infrastructure project to even consider. I mean, it's not millions, it's billions. Or something like that. So yeah,
Okay.
I would hope they would come through, but depends on the politicians and funding and everything at the time.
Yeah. Okay, and then the last question, just on Link 21. So it sounds like in spring, this decision about the track gauge is really deciding between whether the new crossing is going to be a BART crossing versus regional rail. Is there any understanding right now of which of those crossings has a more service area as far as the broader network, not just the crossing location, but the broader network?
Yeah, it's safe to say that the regional rail alternative has a much further reach, and if designed and operated correctly, can nearly serve what the BART system design could do. So it's sort of like, it's a harder ask to go the regional rail because it requires many other projects to work with it. But if you can fill up a cup with the same volume of service and then, you know, make a bigger cup, the regional rail is the bigger cup in terms of, so has a more outreach to go to the regional rail option generally, of further reach and things like that. So, but you know, there's pros and cons, and that's for the boards to weigh in on in fall, I believe.
Okay, all right, thank you.
No questions on my end.
Thank you for the presentation. A couple questions.
Mhm.
I may even direct some to you, Sheena. Going back to Hercules, what are some of the engineering challenges that are being faced?
Okay, some of the engineering challenges are, it's a curve around that area. Building a siding track for freights to continue passing. Sea level rise is not directly a problem right at the station, but on the approaches it is. And then mitigating the loss in travel time for that station stop, finding another suitable location to increase speeds or really improve reliability is I guess, an engineering challenge.
How involved, if you know, are the local, I won't say politicians, but you know, our elected officials in helping you all kind of think about this?
I think pretty involved. I mean, it's been in waves it's been almost 12 years or more. But I think they're pretty engaged. I know the city leadership is wanting this. I haven't been to a city council meeting, but there was a lot of political effort to work on our policies so we could get to this point of being a candidate station.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Couple other questions.
Yeah.
Outside of Hercules.
Mhm.
That was good. We talked about ridership trends at the beginning. I guess in comparison to like the broader regional and, you know, like national patterns, how is this different? How is the ridership trends here different?
Good question. Generally, the Bay Area is not doing as well as like on the East Coast or in the Chicago area in terms of the recovery. There's more work from home. So I think we've lost more and other places are gaining it back faster than the Bay Area. But our service is getting more popular and there's more efforts to bring people back to work. So we'll have to see, but that's generally what's happening. It's that mix of we're now, you know, changing our marketing and some of the offerings to more leisure type things. And that's where we do look at fairs and different promotional ideas to like get families on board or take the Capitol Corridor to a Taylor Swift concert or 49ers, as long as they're doing well.
And Matt, I don't know if you want to add anything, but I think that's pretty consistent, that answer with like BART and Caltrains is that, and just the economic recovery of downtown San Francisco in particular is there's less people going to work today in San Francisco, significantly less than in Chicago and New York City and Seattle. Because of the tech jobs in particular, there was more flexibility to work from home. And so it's impacting all of rail, all of buses, anything else. And I know we've heard, I mean, I think it's less than 40% is back on most of our public transit with the exception of this line out here. Matt, you want to?
Yeah, buses are actually doing a lot better. They're in like the 70–80% recovery, but BART is still under 50%.
We're at about 60%. So not doing too bad relative, but it does hurt.
And just one last question on link 21. I guess I'm just trying to understand like the criteria that are used to prioritize, you know, certain initiatives or certain stages. You probably I know you alluded to it, but I probably missed it.
there's a lot of criteria that they're looking at. It's generally around the prospect of what the offering of a technology could, the extending the reach. So regional rail has a larger reach. But when you get closer into the Bay Area, let's say you were from Sacramento, you're going to be happy that, oh, I can get one seat ride to San Francisco. Whereas BART, that person from Sacramento needs to transfer somewhere when they hit the BART system. Then they'll get on BART and they'll take either the old or the new tube there. So the reach is a big thing, but also, like I said, with the 2 cup analogies, there's a huge demand to get into San Francisco, even as the pandemic, lingers, but it's slowly churns over. That is a kind of a constant. And if you can address that new demand, it does change the criteria. It changes where the alignment would be of BART. It changes what happens with communities. Whereas if you're going regional rail, you're pretty much going to try to connect into the built rail network. So there are different community impacts as well. There's a website for Link 21, and I'm not doing a really great service to answering it as sparsely as I really am. But I think there's those are that's generally what I would say about it. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Rosa from El Cerrito. I think you're the reason why I joined the CCTA. So I think you're the answer to my goal. So our vision in El Cerrito is we do have that congestion on Highway 80 going towards Sacramento.
Yeah.
And so your project would, if we can convince people that are on cars to take rail towards Sacramento, it would improve my quality of life in El Cerrito. So my questions are, in terms of the alignment along Richmond, Berkeley, El Cerrito, Albany, can we reach the goals of high speed and dedicated right of way? So I do agree with your solution of let's have our own dedicated right of way because of safety and traffic concerns. And we do want more throughput. We want to change that 1 hour to 30 minutes, and that's the vision. So can you go either underground or above ground? I don't want like cars to get hurt or pedestrians.
Yeah. There's a lot into your question in terms of community impacts.
Yes.
There's at-grade solutions with a wider right-of-way have a community impact because it's a big swath of more width needed for that distance. But going underground may be better, and that's an option. We would be electrified at that point in time, so we could go underground. The freight is not going to necessarily do that.
Oh, I thought you were just passengers.
Well, we share the tracks with Union Pacific on
Oh, you're
freight
not.
today. So
Oh.
we're sharing with freight today. In the future, we might be side by side, sharing the corridor with freight and passenger, but separated
Mhm.
on different tracks. But if we go underground or above, we are physically separated. But those are some pretty big community impacts to have a elevated rail in your community. It's also big to have a wider swath,
Correct.
knocking out buildings near rail.
Well, safety, like I'm imagining, 30-minute frequency, but I don't want to be blocked for cross traffic.
Yeah,
So underground is worth it to us. And then the other question, I'm also looking at Roseville, the extension.
Mhm.
It's not just Sacramento. People live in Rockland, Roseville, all along that area. So do you extend beyond Sacramento?
Yes, we do. Yeah, we have service. That's one of the projects we're working on now. I didn't cover it here, but we're increasing service to
Vacaville,
Roseville.
Fairfield.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, all of these projects I'm talking about would be involved in projects that increase frequency. So going from an hourly to half hourly.
And then the last question is, are you considering real high speed rail, like the newer technologies? We're talking 2050. Why don't we go all out and go for a fast throughput so that it'd be faster than the cars and it'd be worth paying the $20. So
Let's see. So we've done an analysis. If we can speed up the rails at grade for the most part and share it with freight, there's curves that we have and other things. The best we could really get to is 125, and that's a big investment to go to that. From the next bit is 90, we're at 79 max. So 90 is good, then there's 110. 110 is like the threshold, and then to go to 125, much, much more expensive. But yes, it could be done. It's a lot of money to do that. And there's not as much benefit. So the sweet spot's probably at 90 or 110 in terms of the value of investing, because like on the Northeast Corridor, there's only 17 miles where they hit top speed. So we would want to gauge our speeds based on.
Could we address those bottlenecks then and as part of improving the service?
They would be addressed. The first thing is to fix this bridge lift, because any day you could lose 20 minutes just like that. And if you have more frequency, you're more chances of getting hit, or worse than 20 minutes. So once that investment is made, then it makes the other investments worth it to go faster. So there's kind of this, first do this, then do that, then do that. So there's a stage to reaching those thresholds. But I do want to emphasize what you're talking about in terms of through the urban area. Those are hugely impactful things, to go underground, be wider, or to go above. So those all need a consideration, and there'll be a huge process behind it. We won't be able to, I can't even commit to that right now. It needs a lot of analysis.
Do you need feedback from the community then?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah, a lot of feedback.
No questions from me.
Thank you for your presentation. My first question is around the Carquinez crossing. And I know you mentioned the Benicia Martinez East option would be the most favorable option as of now. And I'm curious, can you speak to like what the impacts of the community would be in terms of like both construction, but then also how they would be served in terms of the routes and things like that?
Okay. Well, the east option probably has truly one of the least impacts to the community. It would stay on the existing alignment. We might be able to improve the speeds through Crockett and other communities that directly touch or lightly touch the route as it is today. So there's definitely some considerations for refineries, but not so many impacts to housing or businesses in that route. It's not to say there's none, but it's much less than certainly going through Vallejo and, you know, cutting off in kind of Richmond or Point Richmond area, or following the 80 alignment. You know, all of those are pretty disruptive, tunnels and so forth. That's what our study would show right now. So that's generally the community level impact in the city of Martinez, because of having to rise to get higher than you do today, because the lift bridge only goes so high. You'd have to get, I think it's 133 feet above the water to clear it, which at rail grade, you take that back to land, you're going to be impacting some intersections. So I think there's two intersections in Martinez. One is to the park along the waterfront there, and then there's another intersection that would have to get some grade separation. But that's generally about it in terms of like neighborhoods and things like that. It just doesn't touch those. So, and we'll still consider serving the same stations. You know, we would serve the same stations. Sea level rise is a big deal. There's a piece of Martinez that, you know, the waterway there, it definitely has some impact. So Martinez might need to do some things, just even if we weren't there anyway, just to protect itself.
And then I was also curious, if I understood correctly, it sounds like that option, it would serve like, you know, people who live in Martinez but are traveling to San Francisco, for example. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Link 21 plus the Carquinez thing equals direct service into San Francisco. In the future.
And the second question I have, it sounds like with Link 21, you've done a lot of public outreach on this project. And I was curious if community members have they shown a preference towards either of the options versus whether it's regional rail or the BART crossing?
I don't think there's I would say maybe leaning towards regional rail. It kind of depends how vocal they are and how they gauge everything. But I think people really like the regional rail. They like the rail approach. And that's one of the things that the BART gauge, when it was chosen, sort of locked you into that. But when you're at a standard gauge, you can use different technologies, different layers of service, especially if you're separated from freight. So I think maybe a slight preference for that, but I don't want to mischaracterize anybody's concerns and also the concerns of board members who are going to hear the pluses and minuses.
Thank you.
Ed Miller, Clayton. So I was just going to ask, you were talking about considering contactless payment options, stuff like that. And one of the things, I know that MTC is working or has been for several years on something that would be the holy grail, of course, having some sort of single payment system or something that would work across the multiple systems around the Bay Area. So I was just going to, number one, sort of put that out there to say, whatever you're thinking about, maybe good to interact with MTC and see if there could be compatibility or whatever with what they're thinking, if they've even adopted something.
I have good news for you.
Oh,
And
I
all
love good news.
So here's 3 cards. The Clipper card, which is my BART card. That is a closed loop system.
I know, it's very expensive to maintain.
Yes.
Extremely.
So that is your money's only good on transit. These are good anywhere. So this is open loop. This is the credit card stuff. So what MTC is moving towards and what we're moving towards is using those credit cards.
Of course.
So it's open loop. So they are still using the back end. It's a cubic system, but it really at the consumer level, once you're using those tools,
You
pretty
got
easy.
You got touch to pay then from phones. You got everything tied in at that point.
So that's where we're seeing transit industry move to. We're going through trials right now to pilots to make it work on the Capitol Corridor, and it's complicated. We're the first in the country to do it. And it's I have gray hair, more gray hair or less gray hair.
I do.
Because of it, but it's tough, but it's really good. The consumers are loving it. It's so much easier.
I do data integration for a living, so I could believe it would be highly complex. I actually was going to say the Clipper card would be the example, the counter example, not to follow in the sense of that closed system. I know is extremely expensive to maintain, and not only that, it's been hugely inflexible for the patrons as well. I see you carry one, then you know that like initially when it debuted, you couldn't even pay for the parking. And then when they did allow you to pay for the parking, it was like, well, but you got to sign up for monthly, and we're going to set up a separate amount of money to escrow for parking. It's just the anti-example of how to do it. But it sounds like you're totally on board. And based on what you're saying, I hope that since you guys are putting in the sweat and learning the hard lessons, there will be some information that you can share back, feedback into the system on the MTC side, so they can, so they can save themselves some time and labor as well.
To chime in on that, MTC there's a coordinated effort now with all the 20+ bus agencies and BART in the Bay Area. And I think I last heard that they were on track to August to roll out a new payment system, which probably means like the end of the year. And it would be coordinated. And one of the big issues is every time you get on and off a different bus company or jurisdiction, you have a different card. And that's been very confusing for the riders. Matt, is that correct? Or Gina, either one of you know?
I'm not sure about the actual product, but I know Seamless is coming up with some recommendations.
It's generally correct. Yeah, it's about that time open loop is adopted across the transit systems, and they're rolling it out in different stages. We've been talking with BART, and the whole idea is, so there's this idea you can use the cards, right? Just like you do at a coffee shop or whatever. That's easy. The integrating of fares to have discounts between agencies
Yeah,
still
yeah.
takes lawyers.
Yeah.
Still takes data transferring between itself, and then
Yeah.
you've got to make it all work in the back end and have it be traceable. How much did they have to pay? Did they do it right? So TfL, Transport for London has solved all these things. And we're getting those learnings and they're involved in our process. CalITP, the California Integrated Travel Project, is a statewide effort to do these things and use GTFS data and other things to level the playing field. So if you want to learn more, CalITP is a statewide effort to bring small transit agencies who can't even imagine this stuff. And then the big MTCs and the LA area are, how do I do this? How do I shift to this? I got the Olympics coming up. Maybe I better do that because, of these things. So it's very exciting. It's but daunting, but it's super exciting.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Michael Kerr, town of Danville. When you show the chevrons in the stage gate process, it woke up a lot of latent brain cells. I used to do that in a former life. It begged a few questions for me. Member Saunders, you asked a really good question around design life, economic life, which can be different. What do you typically target for projects such as these, suites of projects such as these with respect to design and economic life in your decision making?
Well, typically it should be at least 100 years, like that rail bridge that they built that lifts. That's from 1930. It's still functional. So it's roughly on that magnitude. It's really until what I can tell from what I've seen, people maintain this stuff as long as possible. I mean, we're using cars that are old, they get refurbished because it's so expensive. So I would say it seems to be at least 100 years until like the generation and control then says, what did they do? We got to fix that. So we are thinking about it in those terms. It's more about assembling the capacity to do it, assembling the right of ways, because they're not building much more land. That's the big effort, is to get that. And then what you do on it later. But the infrastructure, the rail gets replaced much faster than 100 years. It gets ballast and ties. Everything is maintained at different levels. But that's generally it.
So for something as large as that bridge, what are your investment criteria? I always had to do a do nothing case. Like if you do nothing, abandon.
Yeah.
What do the economics of doing that versus dropping $1 billion or 2 or 3 on a bridge? So and you say I'm doing nothing. At some point, UPRR may have to do something anyway. So just kind of how do you approach all of that? Because it's real money, even if it's federal money, it's still real money at the end of the day. And
that's involved in the planning and the assessment process. Link 21 is definitely doing that in terms of the do nothing versus, and so there's a feel they should do something, or else, we really create a bottleneck in the future. If we don't start now, and it takes us 25 years to do it, it's going to be, we don't want to wait 25 years till it's an emergency. So those analyses do come into play. They will come into play for the Carquinez in terms of even how money is allocated. So you have to do benefit cost analysis. It has a lifespan of like 50 years, usually how they project things out. So they want to make sure that it has a positive ratio when they fund these things.
And just lastly, you mentioned the east approach is preferred. You mentioned some wetlands. When you're talking acreage, are you talking a huge mitigation of wetlands or a fairly de minimis quality of those wetlands, that sort of thing? How big a hurdle is that attribute?
We don't know the extent of it right now because we don't have the designs. That we've just drawn some lines on the map. You can see that it is wetlands, but so that we'll have to go through that process, as another study, but also certainly when we get to the EIR, that would be required. So it's definitely something, and you can mitigate that if you can find other wetlands and restore them.
It can take a long time.
Yeah.
Permits.
There's plenty of work ahead if anybody wants to come.
That's all. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Jim, remember when we were talking before the meeting and Matt said you'd probably get 1 or 2 questions? So we appreciate that you've taken more than that per person.
Okay, no problem.
So I've got just a few clarifying questions. I guess talk about this new track. I know you talked a little bit about like would Union Pacific put in more funding? You might run side by side. So would this design by 2039, would that give you like full control of your own rail? And would that be then cheaper to operate on a day-to-day basis?
That's a big question. I don't know whether the state or some other entity would own the rail, but it definitely would have to be maintained. So we might keep it in Union Pacific ownership and then pay an access fee, and they would charge us enough to maintain that. That's one option. The other option is side-by-side ownership. And that's the way it is in like Salt Lake City. They bought from UP, and the Salt Lake City Transit Authority said, okay, we're buying this. We got to have maintainers and all that stuff. That's all before us, all to be determined.
And with this new route and the addition of Link 21, would there be the possibility to look at additional stops in Contra Costa County, and how does that work? Because that wasn't on your map.
Yeah, we haven't looked at the idea of additional stops, but in the Carquinez crossing, because we're just really looking at the engineering feasibility, what does it say? Link 21 is definitely looking at the options for more stops, infill stops between what we have existing. So there's a lot of talk of running Caltrain through the tube with its frequency and then having it go up to Richmond and having a lot of frequent service there, which sort of replaces really great access, not only to San Francisco, but down the peninsula. But then, so if you have that commuter rail layer, you've got maybe more density of stops. Then the intercity layer usually has less density of stops because it's a different type of service. But the potential's there as Hercules is going in. It's a new station. The real key is to balance that sort of stop density with frequency versus distance covering with frequency and speed. So if I do too many stops, like the train slows down, people are like, well, do this. I'm traveling from Sacramento and keep stopping. No fun.
Yeah, I just think, so I live not far from here, but down Trinidad Ignacio on the other side of Walnut Creek. And right, for me to get on the train in Martinez, by the time I drive to Martinez, even though Martinez isn't so far out of my way, I might as well just drive to Sacramento because I'll be there just as fast, if not faster. So just thinking, and not to say that there would be one in my neighborhood, but just thinking of other places in Contra Costa where we could connect, opens up everything from San Ramon east, right? So just asking from that perspective and sharing that as a comment. And there has been I know on here we talked about Martinez and Hercules, but there was another stop in Contra Costa County in Antioch, correct? And that has closed recently, right? Can you talk about that?
It wasn't,
or
let's see, I think
that
that
you
was
guys?
the San Joaquin's that stopped there, or was that the case? Yeah, that's our sister agency. I don't know the conditions of why it stopped, but I think, I'm gonna guess that the BART connecting system probably outcompeted that or something.
Yeah, I don't know that station has closed. Do we have
Did we have a,
it did? Oh, I was gonna say,
yeah.
okay. Well, there is a new station being built in Oakley. Platform is currently being built in Oakley that would be served by the San Joaquin line. And I'm not sure if that's to replace Antioch per se, because Antioch was on the actual Amtrak system at one point. But I think it was really to fill the void in Oakley. And they supposedly are going to be readjusting the time so that you could actually get on a train in Oakley and be in Oakland by 8 a.m. as opposed to like 10:30. That it would get you there today.
Okay, thanks. I heard lots of rumors about that. So particularly around safety, which was part of my next question with the Oakland stations in particular. Have there been issues related to safety, whether it's parking, pedestrians, issues on the train in particular going on right now?
Well, a pro tip, don't park your car at our Oakland Coliseum station unless you just leave the windows down or whatever, because there's a lot of glass on the ground. So when a new station goes in, it's the city that we try to take care of it. Sports teams are moving out of Oakland like left and right. So that station is not well patrolled even by the city of Oakland police. But in the other stations like Oakland, Jack London, and Emeryville, generally been pretty good. We have Amtrak folks are present there. There's been crime there, but nothing outlandish. And on the trains, it's pretty well patrolled because you've got conductors. And so we haven't had some of the issues that you'll read about or hear about from your friends on other systems, even systems that I work for like BART. But it's not to say it's not there. We're trying to keep very vigilant to what's going on, what's being experienced. And there's Amtrak police that have presence at like Oakland Station. Oftentimes you'll see a car parked there. So it's not quite as scary as some of the other situations that people will feel, different perception levels. But generally, for now, pretty good. Although I will say, that Oakland Coliseum, if you want to go there, take BART, connect. Parking there, we used to get like, hey, I got broken into, and I said, no. 2 weeks later, hey, I got broken in. Same. I'm like, well, you gotta keep it going. You're going to keep an auto glass company in business.
Yeah. And then on another terms of safety, you're talking about a bridge that's now 100+ years old, still operational, but they're hand making parts kind of thing.
If they need them, yes.
What's the safety feature of that bridge you're talking about right now? It's got to last until at least 2039. So another 15, 20 years, right?
Now, that bridge is very rock solid unless that's the way we don't want ships hitting them. But it's a really good bridge and it's held up quite well. It's just the mechanical parts. If they wear out, they're like, okay, I need to rebuild it in shape and reinstall it, which doesn't happen too often, but it's not like the parts are standardized. It's your great grandfather's kind of technology and stuff like that. So the bridge is quite safe though, and it stops if it gets hit by a boat. It gets all fully inspected and train shut down, all that kind of stuff. So not to worry about that bridge. Even though it's rusting, it's very, very solid. It's heavily overbuilt. Big time.
Good, thanks. And sorry, I didn't mean to, if that was the inappropriate timing to be asking that question, sorry.
No, it's very appropriate because I mean, they have to be safe. And the navigation has to be very safe. And it's taken very seriously, both by those in navigational, the Coast Guard, and especially Union Pacific, because if something happens and it wasn't detected or somebody looked the other way, it'd be devastating. So it's run and monitored very safely. It meets all the inspections. It's just that we don't, we hope that situation that's just happened in Baltimore, which is really unfortunate.
Ed, did you want to?
No.
Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, they have, tugboats and trying to keep it all.
I think that was my questions. For those of you who wanted to learn about the Hercules Hub, there is a podcast episode specifically about the Hercules Hub. Total, since Ed, it's episode 2, but so Ed will mention it so I don't have shameless self-promotion.
Yeah, you should listen to that podcast that Garrett runs that brings in different community volunteers to talk about what they're doing in the community. Yeah.
But that was specifically on episode 2. Sorry, couldn't resist because it was a whole conversation. So do we want to do a a letter here on an issue that we talked about, and we want to come back to that?
If you want to agendize it for a separate conversation at our next meeting, we can do that or whatever.
Is that the appropriate timing? I'd like to take some action.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I think probably we could discuss it as a separate action at another meeting.
Okay. Yeah, to vote on it, I just didn't know if, so, okay, so we could sort of direct staff to put that on the agenda.
And I-
Okay, awesome.
We can work with Matt to, characterize the question and get, information for a well thought out letter.
Yeah, that would be good. And I would encourage you to come back as you reach the next sets of planning phases and we'd look at writing support along with requesting our board to support for, funding options and station options and like to be part of that process as a stakeholder here in Contra Costa County for this.
Yeah. Just a quick question. Has Link 21 probably has not come by to talk to this group, have they? Okay, I'll mention it to the staff who are working on that. I think this is a great opportunity. Your board here, this group is very informed, has great broad perspectives and has connections both, on the East Bay and then also further out. So I think it would be a very fruitful thing to engage with this board. So I'll work with you, Matt, to make that introduction.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Jim. We
Thank you.
appreciate your patience and taking a lot of questions. You did awesome. So,
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
all right. Well, do I have any public? Sorry, wait, do I have anybody on Zoom?
No, no public comments.
Okay. Great. We'll skip ahead now. Okay. The next item will be introduced by Matt Kelly and presented by the California Department of Transportation. Are they here?
They are here, they are virtual. So I will introduce the item. Thank you, Chair. So tonight we're going to talk about the I-680 CMCP or Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan. You long timers may remember back in last summer, we received this item when the study or the effort was just getting going. We now have a draft corridor plan that you can find in your agenda packet. But I'm going to turn it over to John Zhu from Caltrans District 4. They're our local partner and working on all things related to the state highway system. John will tell you about why CCTA and Caltrans have partnered on this multimodal corridor study. The reason why Caltrans is not just looking at the highway and is looking at the corridor multimodally and what is in it for residents of Contra Costa County. So I'm going to turn it over to John and have him walk you through the draft I-680 CMCP. John?
Thanks, Matt. Let me share my screen very quickly. So hope you can all see my screen. Good evening. My name is John Zhu. I'm with Caltrans District 4 System Planning. I'm the lead for the Contra Costa I-680 Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan, or CMCP. As Matt mentioned, we introduced the CMCP last summer. Since then, we have made pretty significant progress on the document development. And I'm happy to report that we recently completed a draft CMCP. So tonight, I'm going to share some of the key elements of the draft document. But before I do that, I want to go over some of the CMCP basics. So what is a CMCP? The CMCP really aims to do two things. First, to comprehensively identify multimodal corridor needs, and then second, recommend projects through a collaborative process to address those needs. The CMCP is a corridor planning document. It is not a project, so it's not subject to the environmental review process. So why are we developing a CMCP for the I-680 corridor? The reason is twofold. First, Caltrans is required by law to do long-range planning for each of our state highway corridors. And second, the CMCP will qualify corridor projects for future funding opportunities, such as the Senate Bill 1, Solutions for Congested Corridors Program, or SCCP. As you probably know, we are trying to apply SCCP funding for the northbound express lane project on 680. So to qualify the project for this funding program, we need to develop a CMCP. So here's an overview of the corridor. The CMCP covers the entire I-680 in Contra Costa County, but it's not just about the freeway main line and ramps. We are actually including local arterials, rail and transit services, back-end pedestrian facilities, parking lots, and shared mobility hubs. Here's the overall development schedule for the CMCP. As I mentioned, we recently completed the draft CMCP, and we're currently doing document review to give our internal and external stakeholders a chance to provide input. So we're targeting the end of the fiscal year or end of June this year to have the CMCP finalized. The CMCP is being guided by these 7 corridor goals. These are also the goals for the Innovate 680 programs. Just a quick sidebar there. For those of you who don't know, the Innovate 680 program is really a package of multimodal projects led by CCTA with the goal to improve the overall travel experience for the I-680 corridor. So we're using the same goals, and we also use these goals to help evaluate the corridor projects. So tonight, I really want to share 2 things with you from the draft CMCP. First is engagement, both stakeholder engagement and public engagement. And second, the final project list. So let's start with the stakeholder engagement. The Innovate 680 program has a technical advisory committee and a concept of operations working group, also known as the Tech ConOps working group. So this is the main platform that we have been using for stakeholder engagement for the CMCP development. And then the Innovate 680 program also has a policy advisory committee, or PAC. And we have been keeping the PAC updated on the CMCP as well. In addition, we're coordinating with several CCTA committees or groups, including the Paratransit Coordinating Council, the Countywide Back and Ped Advisory Committee, as well as this group, the Citizens Advisory Committee. Here is some of the key feedback we received from our stakeholders. Many stakeholders emphasized that safety, especially back and ped safety, is a top priority for this corridor. Several jurisdictions along the corridor commented that because the freeway is often congested during peak periods, and there's generally a lack of high quality transit in this corridor, traffic often spills over onto local arterials, which is a major concern to many cities. Bus priority projects and first mile and last mile connection projects are also important improvements for this corridor. Then there is a need to develop low stress bike facilities on arterials, in addition to the bike path we have within this corridor, such as the Iron Horse Trail. Last but not least, charging infrastructure was suggested to us for both EVs and e-bikes. Moving on to public engagement. CCTA hosted a series of public engagement events last summer known as the Summer Event Series. So 6 of those events occurred within the I-680 corridor. And of those 6 events, the Caltrans CMCP team went to 3 of them, including the City Center Farmers Market in San Ramon on July 29, the Music and Market event in Concord on August 10th, and the Farmers Market in Martinez on August 27. Here's the summary of the key feedback we received from the public. There were quite a few comments about having more frequent and more reliable transit within this corridor. There were also several comments about improving the Iron Horse Trail, especially at crossing locations. Bike parking was suggested, especially at the transit stations. Then at the Martinez event, several people commented on the need to improve the I-680 State Route 4 interchange. And then at the San Ramon event, there were a couple of folks complaining about the pavement conditions between San Ramon and I-580, of which, by the way, we shared this input with our maintenance group, and they are looking to develop a project to address this need. So in response to the feedback we received and to address the corridor needs that we identified through our own technical analysis, we have developed a project list. The project list is broken down into several categories. So there are highway projects such as the northbound express lane completion project I just mentioned, a couple of aux lane projects, as well as the 684 interchange project. There are also technology projects such as the corridor adaptive brand metering, as well as the coordinated adaptive traffic signals on local arterials. For transit projects, examples include the new I-680 Express service and the Bus on Shoulder project. We also heard from our transit agency stakeholders for their projects, such as the Bar Station Modernization Project and the County Connection Expansion Project. There's also a proposed landside improvement project to support potential future ferry service in Martinez. That's also part of the transit projects. We also have put together a fairly long list of back and pad projects, which I'll go over later in this presentation. CCTA has identified several transit stations and or park and ride lots to be upgraded to become shared mobility hubs. And that's actually part of the Innovate 680 program as well. So we're including those shared mobility hubs in the CMCP as well. And then many local jurisdictions along the corridor have EV charging stations planned or proposed. So we are including those as well. Last but not least, there are a couple of study recommendations, such as a transit study by County Connection, as well as a climate change adaptation study to look at the sea level rise impact at the 680 Marina Vista interchange area. So here's a map showing all the CMCP projects. I know this is a pretty busy map, so let me try to highlight some of the projects for you. So along the I-680 freeway, you will see a yellow line that represents the technology project package that I just mentioned. Then next to that yellow line, you will see an orange line, which is the new express bus service between Martinez and the future Tri-Valley hub. And then next to that, there's a green line for the northern half of the corridor. That is the northbound express lane completion project that we're trying to nominate for a CCP funding this year. Then there's a blue dot at the 680 State Route 4 interchange, representing the interchange improvement project with multiple phases. And further down south along the corridor, you will see some purple lines. Those are the aux lane projects. And then there are some green dots and green boxes along the corridor. Those are the shared mobility hubs that CCTA has identified. Lastly, there are quite a few red balloons. Those are the proposed or planned charging stations. Now I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the back and pad projects. So this CMCP envisions a bike and pad network. So the goal here is really to identify a network that provides seamless connections to transit and other destinations, as well as providing a contiguous route for bicyclists to traverse the corridor from end to end. The network is comprised of both existing facilities and planned projects, with a focus on freeway crossings as well as parallel facilities within 1 mile from the freeway. The major data sources we use to create this network include the Caltrans District 4 bike plan, the District 4 pedestrian plan, and the CCTA countywide bike and ped plan. So overall, we have identified over 50 crossing locations, as well as almost 100 parallel segments. So we put this network on a web map, and the link to the web map is included in the draft CMCP. I should also note that the CMCP back and ped network connects to other local facilities and is really part of a larger county-wide network. So in terms of the CMCP next steps, as I mentioned, we're currently doing document review to collect comments. We're also doing the final round of stakeholder engagement, including this meeting here today. After those activities are completed, we will try to get the document finalized and approved, then remediate it for ADA compliance so we can post it on our website. Before I close, I want to take this opportunity to thank this committee for your guidance and assistance in the development of the CMCP. Your input has made this CMCP a stronger, more robust document. So thank you. So that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you, John. And we're going to go this way around this time to keep everybody on their toes a little bit.
Just real quick, props to listening to those who expressed concerns about the road surface between San Ramon and the 580. First time I hit that when I moved here 7, 8 years ago, I thought my car was about to fall apart. It was so bad. So glad that's on your radar screen, and Godspeed.
Thank you for your presentation. And this is Jency James from the City of Concord. You mentioned that you're heading into the final round of stakeholder engagement. Can you describe some of the ways community members could give their input on the plan?
I should probably clarify the last round is strictly for stakeholders, mainly agency stakeholders. So we presented the CMCP to the countywide back and ped advisory committee on Monday. Then we're presenting to this group today. We also want to share the draft CMCP with the Paratransit Coordinating Council at their meeting, probably in May or June. I may be misspeaking there. And then the Innovate 680 Tech ConOps working group, that's our main stakeholder engagement platform. So we have shared the draft document with the TAG ConOps working group members for their review. So the final round is really focused on seeking additional feedback from the agency stakeholders.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
One other question. I know you mentioned, I think there was one specific project that you're hoping to apply for, I think it was a federal grant.
It's a state.
A state grant. What are some other projects, or are you looking at other projects to qualify for state or federal grants?
Yes, the Northbound Express Lane project is going after this program I mentioned, the Solutions for Congested Corridors program. And then we're also looking to nominate the 684 interchange project, or 2 or 3 phases of the interchange project to a different state program. That is the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program. Of course, Caltrans has our own internal project nomination prioritization process. So as a district, we will submit our proposals or nominations to headquarters. Headquarters will make a decision on which projects would be selected as the statewide priorities to go forward. So if those projects don't get picked up by us, Caltrans, then I guess either CCTA or in coordination with MTC, they can submit the projects as well. And those are the two main on-system projects that I'm aware of. And there are also multimodal projects that are probably off-system. And for those projects, we usually do not take the lead role. But as you know, there are many state programs and federal programs right now. So when a lead agency or a project sponsor wants to nominate their projects, and they can come to us if we decide that their projects are in alignment with the statewide goals or policies we have, then we can support a project in the form of providing a letter of support.
Got it. So it sounds like the stakeholder agencies could, submit an application to potentially apply for a grant.
Correct.
Okay.
And I should also add that more increasingly, we're seeing that these funding programs would really encourage first agencies to work together as a team, and second, to develop an overarching corridor vision before applying for funding. Because then in the funding applications, we can really tell a story how each project would fit in with this larger corridor vision that would really help improve the project's competitiveness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. It does seem like you did take some of my feedback earlier, so thank you very much. Everything looks great. Just 2 questions. More important one. Do you have funding, or are you proposing to harden the right of way so that indigents don't do drugs underneath the freeways? Or is that considered? I don't know if we have that problem on the 680.
Not that I'm aware of, but what I can say is that we have a pretty robust program to look at unsheltered and how there could be potential conflicts between the unsheltered and our maintenance needs. And I recently learned from our landscape architecture, sometimes we can use different landscape architecture design features to discourage encampment near our right-of-way. So that's definitely being looked at.
Okay, thank you for looking into that. That would be my biggest feedback. And then the second question is, you said you're encouraging the cities to fund some of the projects. How does that work in general?
Well, I mean, so there are a lot of funding programs out there, and each funding program has its own requirements. and only certain projects would be competitive for certain programs. So I guess what I'm saying is that if a local jurisdiction wants to submit a project to a particular funding program, and they can reach out to us to request a letter of support. And if we decide that the project is aligned with our statewide goals and policies, then we can write that letter of support that would help increase the competitiveness of the application.
And I guess maybe what I was thinking, Caltrans maintains the 680 corridor, but does the city maintain the arterial streets, the city property? That's what
Correct.
is that what you meant? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Okay.
Great, just a couple questions for me. What are your long-term, or what are the long-term visions? And I ask this because I'm trying to understand how the plan accounts for potential future challenges, such as, climate change, demographic shifts, etc.
Right, very good question. So first, in terms of demographic change or population and employment growth, we relied on existing studies, or I should say the project level studies. Those studies took into consideration the forecasted land use changes as well as socio-economic changes. And in the modeling exercise, the project level documents were able to really see what the future needs are and how effective the solutions would be. So that's number one. And can you repeat the first part of your question?
Sure. It was mostly the vision, which I think you've touched on, but I wanted to understand how it accounts for potential future challenges.
Yeah, good point, because I think you mentioned climate change and sea level rise. In the document, we actually have a pretty robust climate change discussion, and sea level rise is definitely one of the more prominent impact that we see within this corridor, especially for the northern part of the corridor near the bay. So the CMCP actually is recommending a sea level rise adaptation study to look at the 680 Marina Vista interchange, because just based on our studies before, this area may be subject to future sea level rise impact. So we want to take a closer look at this area to see where the impact would be, where the water would be coming from, and what kind of adaptation strategies that we can develop to address that vulnerability. So that's just one example of how we are looking into the future and try to identify the needs, and then from there recommend projects to address the needs.
Great, thank you. Last question, I believe you mentioned community engagement. So did any of the community members bring up concerns related to noise, air quality, land use impacts in the implementation phase of the project?
Now, during the events that we attended, but I would say just my impression was that overall there was a lot of support for multimodal improvements such as transit projects as well as bike and path projects. So there's a focus to shift away from more highway oriented type of projects to be more multimodal, but nothing specific on the implementation side of it.
Thank you.
I've got just one question. Just out of curiosity, was there an analysis done to see what the impact would be on other corresponding freeways or highways, say Highway 4, if you, as you kind of impart certain portions of the project, what that impact would be to the other?
Not in this specific plan, But I would say in general, those impacts would be analyzed at the project level. So as you probably know, each project will go through its own analysis and as well as the environmental review process. So in the case of the northbound Express Lane completion project, for example, I believe it's currently in the environmental review phase. So the environmental document should be analyzing various impacts to the community, to the environment. So the planning level document that I'm presenting tonight does not get into the specific level of project's impacts.
Gotcha, thank you.
And I'll just add that CCTA is part of our countywide transportation plan. We look at all of the projects proposed and how they affect the entire system. So we'll be coming to this committee to present our CTP efforts, and we'll be looking a lot at the future impacts on all the entire system.
Hi, John. Thanks for your presentation. Wondering what kind of level of planning you've had with Alameda County as the 680 corridor goes south? Because I know it's a main arterial that doesn't quite, it doesn't stop with our county.
Yeah, great question. We actually collaborated with Alameda CTC, that was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, to develop Alameda I-680 CMCP. So that's for the Alameda portion of the 680 corridor. And that the CMCP is posted on our website. So if you Google CMCP District 4, it will lead to the website that hosts all our corridor plans. And we work very closely with Alameda CTC as well as others, corridor stakeholders on that one.
Gotcha. And next, you mentioned some multimodal. Were you studying any kind of trains or microtransit options for this corridor?
Not specifically. I'm not sure if you are familiar with the transit study that CCTA did a few years back. I think the study recommended a new express bus service along this part of 680 to connect the Amtrak station at Martinez down to, I guess, the Pleasanton, Dublin area to connect to the future Valley Link, as well as BART down there. So that was the recommendation. And I believe this recommendation was recently picked up by the state, and the project has received funding to be implemented. So the short answer is no train improvement specifically proposed or planned for this corridor, but there is an express bus project being implemented.
Thank you very much.
We did actually study extending BART through the 680 corridor in 2015 to connect Walnut Creek with Dublin Pleasanton. And unfortunately, the results of that project showed that, well, we had a lot of opposition from communities within the corridor. And we also found that it was a very expensive undertaking. So more recently, we started looking at express bus through the corridor, and that has penciled out a lot better and should be funded as part of the northbound express lane project as a mitigation for the project.
One question, John. Thank you for your presentation. As one of the committees or entities that you've been coordinating your work with, have you had dealings or communications with the Iron Horse Trail Corridor Management Committee? I'm on that committee, and I know that they have had a study that was prepared about a couple of years ago, Matt, right? That talks about the vision or the future possibilities for the Iron Horse Trail, being right now only recreational trail and pedestrian bike oriented, versus having something to the effect of autonomous vehicle or shuttles going down there? Is that something that would come up as part of your study?
Not that proposal specifically. I think we are aware of the study you're referring to. I think Matt shared with us the study. But I don't think we have included any autonomous shuttle proposals as part of the Iron Horse overall vision. But I mean, that's something we can definitely look into.
It might be good if you have the time and the chance to come to that committee and make a presentation. It's every 3 months, every quarter, there is a meeting. And Carl Roner from the county is the main person contact. Carl Roner, R-O-N-E-R.
Where are those meetings conducted?
They're usually held now in person, used to be virtual, but now in person at the county offices in Martinez. I'm sure, Matt, you can provide that connection. Thank you. Thanks, John.
Yeah, thank you.
Real quick, I don't really have a question, but I think these kinds of studies are really important. I kind of really like hearing more about them. Certainly listening to the feedback process, I think when you presented earlier, and I followed it, for a couple of years, I think you can see the changes and the results. And to me, it's nothing's perfect, but it comes together nicely. So I think that's what CCTA, we should be doing more of that and listening to more and providing. I think there's interesting feedback from people about it. So thank you, John, and I look forward to seeing some of the projects implemented. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. My question is about money. If all of the things on your list come through, including some of the money from the cities for the local stuff, how much money does that cost? And what is the impact on traffic, right? Is it $1 billion and we're going to reduce 42 cars, or kind of looking for some understanding of a ratio?
Right, that's a good question, because at the planning level, we don't necessarily have that level of information, because the cost estimate that we are including in the CMCP is at the planning level. And those cost figures will get more refined when we go through the project development process. And also at the project analysis, at the project level, each project, I believe, will go through an analysis called the benefit cost analysis. So that's where you compare the project cost to the level of benefits a project could provide. And usually we would only do a project when the benefits outweigh the cost. So yeah, so that's the level of information we have in our plan.
Okay, so as we move forward, and Matt and Emily too, if we can get an update, I guess, on those figures as the planning reaches the next stage, in that I love everything we're going. I'm a little skeptical of this project and some of these ideas having like major significant impacts compared to some of the other projects. But this is such a vital artery, so I'd love to see everything we can do, and hopefully it does, like you said, make sense financially, and there is even a 5% impact is worth a significant amount of traffic, especially as the region continues to grow with the new housing numbers.
Yeah, you bring up another very good point, because these planning documents are really meant to be living documents, if you will. So our goal is to really try to keep them updated on a regular basis. And as part of the overall planning process, it's not just that we do a plan, we put it on the shelf. We want to be able to continuously monitor the performance of the corridor. And then, I guess, at certain points or when we hit certain milestones in terms of major changes in policies or goals or major shift in traffic patterns, we want to come back and update the plan. So that's something that's on our work plan, and we will continue to monitor the performance of the corridor.
Thanks. Does anybody else have a follow-up or you're all good? Okay. Thank you so much, John. Oh, wait,
Chair-
is there public comment?
While we're waiting for that, I'll just note that we are working on a CMCP parallel document or CMCP equivalent document for Highway 4 right now. So we'll be coming to this group probably later on this year to present you a similar report for Highway 4.
And no public comments.
Awesome. Glad we have a very engaging public tonight. So thanks again, John. Appreciate it. So the next informational item as we roll along tonight will be presented by the infamous Matt Kelly. So Matt, do you need to introduce yourself or just dive in here, man?
To get you guys out of here as soon as possible, I'm just going to dive right in. This is a very short item, but in my mind, it's a very important item. So I'm going to share it with you and kind of tie everything together here, how it fits in with what you do as a committee. So I'm here to talk about the Measure J urban limit line and the annual policy advisory that CCTA provides to our 20 local jurisdictions. As the majority of you are representing your local jurisdiction, we wanted you to know what each jurisdiction's responsibility is as far under the growth management program, specifically as it relates to the urban limit line. So I'm just going to walk you through this very quickly. If I can get this to advance here, let's see. Here we go. Okay, so a little bit of background on the urban limit line. The urban limit line was first a part of our Measure C, which is why CCTA formed, was to pass Measure C back in '88. And we passed our first sales tax. The county then, to respond to our Measure C, passed their own Measure C, which set up this 6535 ordinance, which basically said that within Contra Costa County, at least 65% of the lands would be preserved for agricultural, open space, wetlands, parks, and other non-urban uses, leaving no more than 35% of land to these urban uses we find around us here. And it established this urban limit line, a line that basically draws a line where development can occur. And then in 2004, you all, in your infinite wisdom, passed Measure J. That extended our sales tax for transportation out to 2034 and required compliance with the ULL, the county's ULL, in order to receive the return to source funds. So this goes back to the checklist. You all are responsible for reviewing the checklist and determining the local's compliance with the growth management program. And one component of that checklist is the ULL, but it really is a huge component of the growth management program and what the growth management program seeks to do and to really, limit the expansion of new development and keep it within our built environment. And so, so for the cities to receive their return to source funds, $24 million a year, at least this last year, having an urban limit line is one of the major requirements for receiving those return to source funds. Oh, wrong direction. Let's see. So following Measure J, the county then really, they extended their ULL ordinance under Measure L, which kind of beefed up the ULL ordinance itself, required 4/5 of the Board of Supervisors and voter approval to expand the urban limit line by more than 30 acres. It adopted a new map. The county's map and established new review procedures. So then when CCTA implemented Measure J, they brought in the urban limit line into the growth management program and made it a requirement to receive that return to source fund. And all 19 cities were required to adopt a voter-approved urban limit line by 2009 to comply with Measure J. So beginning on April 1st, 2009, it was established that each jurisdiction must establish a voter-approved limit line, meaning it must go out to all the voters, and they must come up, approve one of the options. And basically, everybody either adopted the county's urban limit line as their own, 16 jurisdictions and the county comply with that option. And 3 of our jurisdictions, Antioch, Pittsburgh, and San Ramon, adopted their own local voter-approved ULL. So basically, they took the time to sketch out their own urban limit line and approved it. So that was the option they had. And here's what those local referendums produced, is this one urban limit line. Well, I'll say one, but it does have some islands out there like the Byron Airport and Discovery Bay and Bethel Island. So every year, the authority issues an annual policy advisory letter, which really reminds our local jurisdictions of what they are required to do, what their responsibilities are under the growth management program. So really, when they are considering anything outside their urban limit line, they need to request an evaluation by the authority on what those proposed local actions would do. And then the authority responds basically saying, this is how your land use decision would affect your compliance with the growth management program. And so the criteria that we're looking at is, does the development lie within the ULL? If it does, it's not a big question. We're okay with it. If the proposed development involves a non-sequential, non-contiguous adjustment of 30 acres or less, it's also okay. So basically what we're saying is you can make one adjustment, but if you try and add on to that, that's a no-no. You can't just keep adding on and say 29 acres, 29 acres, 29 acres. Oh, no. And it does not involve an extension or an expansion of urban services across the ULL boundary. That was the original intent back in 1988, that we're not having to, new development is not forcing the transportation agency to have to build new roads, new freeways, new transit lines, but also the local services, the fire, police, sewer, water, all those things that must be expanded at great cost anytime a city decides to expand their development outside their urban limit lines. So that is the urban limit line requirement in a nutshell, the reason why it's part of the growth management program and the growth management program checklist that you guys review. So what we want, really, I'm just here today to let you know what we're telling the cities. We tell them that every year. We don't bring it to you every year, but we know we've got a lot of new members, so we decided to get everybody up to speed and let you know what your cities are dealing with, so you can be on the same page as them. So that's my presentation, and I can take any questions.
Before I go to the group, Matt, that's going to be up for a vote next, or in 26, right?
2026, the county's line expires and they will need to take that to the voters.
Who's got questions on this? All right.
So can you go to the previous slide, Matt? So I guess I don't understand the 30-acre thing. So if they have their limit, a city can add 30 acres in the 10-year period, or for a project? I don't get what they can change.
For a single development. So if a project is, proposed, at the edge of, say, Brentwood, we'll say Roddy Ranch, if you're familiar with the area, you know, it's at the very edge of Brentwood. If they wanted to bring that in and it's 100 acres, they would have to go out to the locals. If they just wanted to bring in a 20-acre portion, they would be allowed to do that.
But a whole bunch of developers could do 29 acres all around and it could creep.
If those acreages are contiguous, are touching, then it would not be allowed.
Okay, but so they, okay, I got you. Okay, thanks.
So my question is, so the cities have to expand their urban limit line into the unincorporated areas of the county, and do the residents of the unincorporated areas have any say in where that urban limit line goes, or can they push back, or how does that work?
Yeah, so you know, it depends on where the line is, and if it's you know, sometimes it goes just into the say, say Brentwood, into Brentwood's sphere of influence, and it's still not on unincorporated lands. And so then it would be fully within the, you know, the voters of Brentwood, or the decision makers in Brentwood, to decide that. But if it did, you know, affect county unincorporated land, then the county would definitely weigh in, and anybody, you know, in those locations would be part of the vote to, you know, to affect that. Technically, if they're part of the new area, they would be allowed to vote on that. I believe that's how it's structured. But generally, the county would, if it's affecting the unincorporated area, the county would have the right, their board of supervisors have to weigh in on it as well. And you would need 4/5 of the board of supervisors to approve something like that. So yeah, anytime you do an expansion like that, it's affecting someone other than yourselves.
Sure. So, for example, I live in El Sobrante, and the map of Richmond around El Sobrante is really funky.
Yep.
So if my area that's unincorporated wanted to say be incorporated into Richmond, would, you know, what would that process look like?
So that would probably be treated as an annexation, which it's a LAFCO issue, the Local Agency Formation Committee. I believe those would be different issues. If an unincorporated area were annexed into an existing city, that would go through LAFCO, and that wouldn't apply to the 30-acre issue.
Okay, thank you.
I think this is pretty obvious, but how do you deal with non-compliance? Kind of touching on that question.
Good question. Non-compliance for any of the items on the checklist is generally treated the same. If you are determined to be out of compliance, you are no longer able to receive your local return to source funds, the 18% that you guys dole out by approving the checklists. You know, that ranges from, you know, $500,000 for our smaller cities per year to 3-4 million for places like, you know, Concord and the county. So it's a big hit. And it also deprives them of other Measure J funds, like the Transportation for Livable Communities funding, which is, you know, several million per year. So it's something that our jurisdictions stay away from as much as they possibly can. We've had very few issues with non-compliance, just because we have that stick or carrot in place, depending on how you want to look at it. So yeah, we've had very few issues of non-compliance. Only in the 17 years I've been here, only one jurisdiction has been out of compliance, and it was just for a matter of months while they were going through some legal issues.
First of all, Ed Miller, of course. That's one of the highest super majorities I think I've seen. 4/5 vote is exceptionally high. I've not seen anything like that in any other tax measure or other kinds of things. Looking at that map, I just wanted to ask, it looks like right now the urban limit lines only occupy about 45% of the total county or so, right? I mean, we're not anywhere close to the 35% reserve amount. We're not, we're like maybe at 45% out of 65%. That would be a theoretical maximum. Not saying that all of that's buildable, by the way. There's a little mountain somewhere in there. Anyway, just was observing
Yeah,
we're way under the number that is thrown out there.
and the county a few years ago did a assessment of the urban limit line. What they do is they look at the amount, that amount, and I forget what the amount is, but you're right, they're still within the threshold. And they also look at if the urban limit line can handle the growth forecasts for the county through, I think they look at 2040 or 2050. So they say, is it adequate to support our future growth? And they determined in their last review that it was.
We don't have any power. Like it's the CCTA official board that gets to vote on the checklist, not us. Like
You are recommending approval to the board. So they do make the official decision, but they won't make a decision without a recommendation from this committee.
Oh, so we do have power.
Yes.
Oh, thank you for
You're an
clarifying.
advisory committee,
Oh.
but
Oh,
yeah,
thank you
you're
for
an
pointing that
advisory
out.
committee, but they are depending on you to make that recommendation.
Nice, thank you.
Just ask the guy from Oakley who we sent back to the drawing board on some paperwork was that's like the one statutory authority I think our group actually has, right, Matt? Is
Yep.
those
You
recommendations.
can question compliance and ask for, more evidence of compliance. And, you guys, the one thing sorry, this is just an aside, but, you don't see, you don't get the full picture. You don't get a full staff report that puts out the amount of money that you guys are doling out each meeting, because that goes to the board. But, I should probably start including the amount of the LSM funding that you guys are actually allocating each time you approve a checklist, because that's something I noticed you don't see that amount. And I think you would probably, you'd probably feel a greater feeling of importance when you understand, this checklist is giving $4 million to Concord or the city you live in, or, $1 million to Danville or something like that.
Do you have one spreadsheet you could send us with like, here's the 20 jurisdictions?
Yeah.
I think that would be awesome.
Yeah.
My one question on the urban limit lines relates to particularly RENA housing numbers. Did anybody in the RENA housing numbers, which I know is not your particular expertise, did they have to challenge the urban limit lines, right? With 2/3 roughly protected for open space or other uses, do we have enough to continue to grow to fulfill the overall housing shortage in the Bay Area? I don't know if you could.
Yeah, I mean, that was the analysis that the county did in, I believe, 2016. That was an earlier RENA cycle, but they determined at that point that the current urban limit line could handle that current, RENA allocation and forecasts. I believe at the time it was through 2040. So yeah, we've never had a city say we can't meet our RENA allocation because of the urban limit line that's been imposed on us or something to that effect. Is that your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Emily, any public?
We have not received any public comments.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Before we. Yeah, I think there's a limit on how much we can, we can't really debate it today, but I think the direction is we're gonna ask staff to, is it draft a letter with some of those recommendation points that this committee should review, and then at our next meeting, we could debate on each of those points, and let's say staff comes up with 7, we could choose to put 4 or 5 in, or whatever. Is that? the
We,
correct
we
process?
could do it either way. Either we could come in with a draft based on what we've heard today and have you guys, pick it apart, or we could just come in and listen, have a discussion and draft a letter based on that. I'm open to either. If you want us to bring in something to start with, we can.
Yeah, I think if you guys could bring in points
Okay.
to guide the conversation, and then we could debate the conversation that will allow and approve. I would like to vote on it to be able to, at the end of the discussion, to be able to approve it.
Yep.
Okay. Announcements, I think thank you, Matt. Announcements. I've got one. It looks like Emily might have a few. Do you have a few? Okay. Leadership Contra Costa County, which is sponsored by East Bay Leadership, Walnut Creek Chamber, and Kaiser. They are recruiting for another class. They bring in speakers from almost every city, the county, and really do day-long sessions of training and education. They are looking for new people for their next class. I would strongly recommend you checking it out. For those of you who have a desire to be further involved and know what is going on, you could just Google Leadership Contra Costa. And I believe Matt has said he is a veteran of it and did appreciate going through it. So Emily,
Yep,
did you have?
good stuff.
Yeah, I do
Housekeeping?
actually have one thing. So I had sent out an email a couple weeks ago, looking for interest for the Momentum Station tours. I mean, I had mentioned we were looking at mid-May, so I just wanted to provide you guys with an update on dates and times, just to mark your calendars now. I'll send out another email in the next few weeks to, as we get a little closer to actually get confirmations from folks. But we are going to, right now, move forward with May 14th at 1:30. As well as May 16th at 10 a.m. And tours are about 2 hours. So you'll have an option to choose one. Yep, so we can't have a quorum of members at either tour. May 14th at 1:30.
So somebody's out of both tours, so. All right, any other announcements, thoughts? Make sure you validate your parking too on the way out.
And April 1st is the deadline for submitting your financial, your Form 700, isn't it?
Emily?
That sounds right, yeah.
Yeah, so just, I've heard new members saying, actually, I haven't got mine in either, but there's the Form 700 filing the economic interests, which is like a $10 fine every day that you don't have it in after the first. So.
Emily, will you resend that out? Will you make it a point to resend that out? Because April 1st is coming.
Yeah, I'll talk to Terry Ann. She sends all that out from our database that keeps track of it. So I'll ask her to send.
It's not daunting, so don't be afraid of it.
We can send out emails. So there's an annual, so there's a assuming office as well as an annual.
But you might, if you're on a city committee representing your city here, you may have filled it out there and you're okay because it goes into a state system. But to Ed's point, really double check because it sucks if you're not having it done. Okay, last call, anybody?
Jared.
Yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
one other thing. I graduated from the Leadership Contra Costa program back in 2016. So if anyone has questions about it, happy to speak to my experience. And yeah, it was a really great way to learn about the county and just different programs going on.
Going once, going twice. We are adjourned at 8:32. Thank you, guys. You all rocked tonight. I love the questions, love the energy.